Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Blake Fitzpatrick poured himself a bourbon at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, standing in his home office with the lights off. The amber liquid caught the street light filtering through the blinds. Most men, his age 37, were watching late-night television or already asleep beside their wives. Blake was listening to his wife plot his murder. He'd come home early from his logistics consulting job, a cover for his actual work as a DEA informant embedded with the Martinez cartel's distribution network. 12 years ago, Blake had left the Navy SEALs after 2 tours that left him with skills most men would never need and nightmares most men couldn't imagine. He drifted for a year before the DEA recruited him for deep cover work. The cartel thought he was ex-military gone rogue. The DEA knew he was their best asset. His wife Christina knew he worked in supply chain management for a medical equipment company. Or so he thought. Blake had met Christina Griffin 4 years ago at a charity gala he'd attended as part of his cover. She was a real estate agent with a bright smile and an easy laugh. The kind of woman who made normalcy feel possible. They married after a year, and Blake had carefully compartmentalized his life. The man who coordinated drug shipments and reported to federal handlers ceased to exist when he walked through his front door. At home, he was just Blake, husband, an aspiring normal person. Except normal people's wives didn't make phone calls like the one he'd just overheard. Blake had been in the garage, returning from a run, when he heard Christina's voice through the air vent that connected to their bedroom. Her tone made him freeze low, urgent, nothing like the warm voice she used with him. The drop is Friday. $3 million in cash. We take it all, but we need to kill my sweet husband first. Silence. She was listening to someone on the other end. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Blake's too busy with his boring job to notice what's happening right under his nose. We do it Thursday night. Make it look like a home invasion. Then Friday, we intercept his delivery and disappear. More silence. Blake's pulse hadn't elevated. Years of training kept his body calm even as his mind raced. I love you too. Tomorrow night, we'll finalize everything. He'd heard the call end, heard her move around the bedroom. Blake had quietly entered through the front door instead, making noise, calling out, "Babe, I'm back," as if he'd just finished his run. Christina had come downstairs in her silk robe, smiling. "How was your run?" "Good. Push for 5 miles tonight." He kissed her cheek, searching her face for any hint of the woman he'd just heard. Nothing. Just his wife, concerned about his workout, asking if he wanted water. "I'll make coffee in the morning," she'd said. "You have that early meeting, right?" "Yeah. 7 a.m. A lie. He had no meetings, but he'd play along. "I'll wake you up with fresh coffee. Love you. Love you too." Now, hours later, Blake stood in his office and processed the information. Christina knew about the Friday drop. That was impossible unless someone in the cartel had talked or unless his cover was blown. The $3 million was real. He was supposed to facilitate a major cash transfer from a network of distributors to Pedro Martinez himself, payment for a successful quarter of operations. The money would be in his possession for approximately 4 hours before the handoff. Someone had told Christina about it. Someone who wanted that money. Blake pulled out his encrypted phone, not the one Christina knew about, and sent a text to Calvin Forbes, his DEA handler. "Cover may be compromised. Need meeting. Urgent but not emergency." Calvin responded within minutes. "Tomorrow 6 a.m. Usual place." Blake deleted the messages and poured another bourbon. His wife wanted him dead. The woman he'd shared a bed with for 3 years. The woman who laughed at his jokes and brought him soup when he was sick. Had just planned his murder with the casual efficiency of someone ordering takeout. The question wasn't whether he felt betrayed. The question was what he was going to do about it. Calvin Forbes was former FBI, now DEA, with the weathered face of a man who'd seen too many operations go wrong. He sat across from Blake in a diner 40 miles outside the city, sliding a plate of eggs around without eating them. "Tell me everything," Calvin said. Blake recounted the phone call word for word. His memory was trained to retain operational details conversations. Faces, license plates. Calvin's expression darkened as Blake spoke. "She said, 'My sweet husband,'" Blake finished. Specific phrase. "And she knew about Friday's drop, down to the amount." Calvin set down his fork. "We've got a leak. Has to be. Nobody outside our immediate circle and Martinez's inner command knows about that transfer. Or I've been made, Blake said. If the cartel knows I'm DEA, they might be using Christina to eliminate me and steal the money. Possible, but your cover's solid. You've been with them for 4 years, facilitated dozens of operations. Why now? Because $3 million is retirement money. Blake sipped his coffee. Someone wants out, and they're willing to burn me to get there. Calvin pulled out his phone, scrolling through encrypted files. Christina Griffin, now Fitzpatrick. Real estate agent, clean record. Parents deceased, no siblings. She came from money inheritance from her father's tech company sale. She doesn't need $3 million. Unless she's not doing this alone, Blake said. She mentioned we multiple times. And she said, I love you too at the end. She's got a partner. You think she's having an affair? I think she's having an affair with someone who knows about my work. Someone who has access to cartel information. Calvin's jaw tightened. I'll run deep background on everyone in Martinez's circle. See if anyone connects to your wife. Meanwhile, what are you going to do? Blake met his handler's eyes. I'm going to let her kill me. Calvin blinked. Explain. She thinks I'm clueless. That works in my favor. I keep playing the loving husband, let her and her partner think they have the advantage. Thursday night, they make their move. Except, I'll be ready. We catch them in the act, find out who the leak is, and roll up everyone involved. That's high risk, Blake. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. I've survived worse than a cheating wife and her boyfriend. Blake's voice was cold. But I need to know who the partner is first. That's where you come in. Monitor my house, tap the phones, follow Christina. I need to know who she's meeting with. Calvin nodded slowly. I can have surveillance on her by this afternoon. But Blake, if this goes sideways, if she's working with cartel members who know your face, then I'll handle it the way I handled insurgents in Fallujah, Blake said, with extreme prejudice. Blake went home and kissed Christina good morning like nothing had changed. She smiled at him, that same warm smile, and handed him coffee in his favorite mug. How was your meeting? She asked. Boring contract stuff. You know how it is. He sipped the coffee, noting how she watched him drink it. Was she wondering if she should have poisoned it, testing her own resolve? I've got showings all day, Christina said. Probably won't be home until late. There's leftover pasta in the fridge. I'll grab takeout. Don't work too hard. She kissed him goodbye, and Blake watched through the window as she drove away in her white Mercedes. Within seconds, his encrypted phone buzzed. Calvin had sent a team. They'd follow her every move. Blake spent the day at a cartel-owned warehouse, overseeing a shipment of what the paperwork claimed was industrial equipment. In reality, it was 30 kilos of cocaine destined for distribution across 3 states. Pedro Martinez arrived at noon, flanked by 2 bodyguards. Pedro was in his 50s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, more corporate executive than drug lord. He ran his operation with ruthless efficiency and zero tolerance for disloyalty. Blake, my friend, Pedro said, shaking his hand. Friday's transfer, everything is arranged? All set. $3 million, as agreed. I'll pick up from the collection points Thursday night, secure it overnight, deliver to you Friday at 2 p.m. Pedro studied him. You seem tense. Blake forced a smile. Just want everything to go smoothly. Big number. You've handled bigger. You're my most reliable man, Blake. That's why I trust you with this. Pedro clapped him on the shoulder. After Friday, we celebrate. I'm thinking of expanding your role. More responsibility, more money. I appreciate that, Pedro. As Pedro left, Blake felt his phone buzz. Text from Calvin. She met with a man. White male, 6'2", dark hair. They had lunch at a hotel restaurant. Very intimate. Getting ID now. Blake pocketed the phone. So Christina was definitely having an affair. The question was whether the lover knew about Blake's real work or if he was just a greedy civilian who'd somehow learned about the money. That night, Christina came home at 7, carrying Chinese takeout. Thought we'd have dinner together, she said brightly. I know you said you'd get food, but I missed you today. Blake wondered if this was sentiment or strategy. Was she playing the loving wife one last time before killing him, or was she trying to assuage guilt? They ate at the dining table, talking about nothing or showings, his boring work, weekend plans they'd never keep. Christina reached across and squeezed his hand. "I love you," she said. Blake looked at his wife, this woman he'd shared a life with, who was planning to murder him in 2 days. He squeezed back. "I love you too." Later, in bed, Blake lay awake while Christina slept beside him. His phone vibrated silently under his pillow. Calvin had sent a photo with a name: Dick Logan. Former Marine, dishonorable discharge. Worked as a security contractor, suspected cartel connections. Currently unemployed. Matched him through facial recognition. Blake stared at the photo. Dick Logan was handsome in a rough way, the kind of guy who probably charmed women easily. Former Marine explained how he might have cartel connections. Dishonorable discharge suggested he was willing to bend rules. A second text came. Logan was in Martinez's employ 2 years ago. Low-level courier. Fired for skimming profits. He knows your face, Blake. He knows who you are. Blake felt the pieces click into place. Dick Logan knew Blake worked for the cartel. Logan had met Christina somehow, maybe at one of the social events Blake attended as cover. Logan had seduced her, told her about Blake's criminal work, convinced her they could steal millions and run away together. Except Logan didn't know Blake was DEA. He thought Blake was actually a drug trafficker, which made killing him seem justified in Christina's mind. She probably thought she was eliminating a criminal and getting rich doing it. The irony was almost funny. Blake texted Calvin, "I know who he is. Need full surveillance on Logan. I want to know everything, where he lives, what he's planning, who else is involved." Already on it. "Blake, this is deeper than we thought. Logan has been spotted with Julian Miller and Bernard Graves, both mid-level cartel enforcers. If they're involved, then Friday isn't just about the money," Blake typed back. "It's about eliminating competition. Logan is using my wife to take me out and position himself back in Martinez's organization. What's your play?" Blake looked at Christina, sleeping peacefully beside him. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want. Let them think they've won. Then, I'm going to destroy them all." Wednesday morning, Blake went to the garage and retrieved a locked case hidden behind his workbench. Inside were items from his SEAL days: a Sig Sauer P-226, ceramic body armor, tactical knife, and surveillance equipment. He'd kept them as insurance, never expecting to need them in his civilian life. He checked the weapon, loaded it, and concealed it in his truck. Then he drove to meet Calvin at a safe house the DEA maintained for witness protection cases. "We've got Logan under full surveillance," Calvin said, spreading photos across the table. "He's been meeting with Miller and Graves. We also found this." He handed Blake a document. It was a floor plan of Blake's house, marked with entry points and sight lines. "Professional work. Logan's planning a hit," Calvin continued. "Tomorrow night, multiple shooters. They'll make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Christina will be conveniently out of the house or have an alibi. Then Friday, Logan intercepts the money during your transport to Martinez." Blake studied the floor plan. "They're treating this like a military operation. Logan's using his Marine training, and using former cartel enforcers means they have the muscle. Blake, we need to move now. Arrest everyone. Shut this down." "No." Blake's voice was firm. "If we arrest them now, we don't have enough evidence. Logan and Christina can claim they were just having an affair. Miller and Graves will lawyer up, and we lose the chance to get everyone involved. So what are you suggesting?" Blake pointed to the floor plan. "Logan thinks he knows how to breach my house. What he doesn't know is that I've spent 12 years learning how to eliminate threats in close quarters. Tomorrow night, let them come. I'll be waiting. You want to take on multiple, armed intruders alone? I've done it before. Fallujah, remember? Cleared a building of 8 insurgents solo when my team got pinned down." Blake's eyes were cold. "Except this time, I want prisoners, not bodies. We take them alive, make them talk, roll up the entire conspiracy." Calvin was silent for a moment. "And Christina? She made her choice. She'll face the consequences." "Blake, this is personal. You sure you can keep your head straight?" Blake met his handler's eyes. "I've never been more certain of anything." Thursday morning arrived with autumn rain. Blake kissed Christina goodbye as she left for her showings, knowing she was probably meeting Logan to finalize the plan. He called in sick to his cover job, telling them he had the flu. He needed the day to prepare. First, he went through the house, identifying every advantage and vulnerability. He disabled the interior cameras Christina had insisted they install for security. Now he knew she wanted Logan to study his routines. He repositioned furniture slightly, creating choke points and cover positions. In the bedroom, he placed his ceramic body armor under the bed, within easy reach. Next, he visited a storage unit he'd maintained for 4 years, a secret space Christina didn't know about. Inside were go bags, cash, false identification. The SEAL in him always maintained an exit strategy. He also retrieved additional weapons and tactical gear. By noon, his phone buzzed with updates from Calvin. Christina met Logan at a hotel. Miller and Graves were there too. Looks like final coordination. We've got eyes on all of them. Blake texted back. What's the timeline? They're planning for 11 p.m. Christina will go to dinner with a friend we verified. It's real. Woman named Virginia Greer. The dinner is her alibi. Logan and crew will hit the house while you're supposedly asleep. Christina expects to come home around midnight to find you dead. Perfect. Keep monitoring. I need to know the moment they move. Blake spent the afternoon preparing mentally, the way he had before missions in Iraq. He controlled his breathing, visualized the scenario, planned for contingencies. This wasn't about emotion, it was about execution. At 6 p.m., Christina returned home, changed into a dress, and told Blake she was meeting Virginia for dinner. Girls' night, she said, smiling. I'll be back late. Don't wait up. Blake pulled her close, kissed her forehead. Have fun. Love you. Love you too. Did her voice catch? Did she feel any guilt about what was coming? He watched her drive away, then immediately moved into action. He changed into dark tactical clothing, strapped on the body armor, checked his weapons. The Sig Sauer went into a shoulder holster, the tactical knife on his belt. He positioned himself in the darkened living room with a clear view of all entry points. Then he waited. At 10:47 p.m., his encrypted phone vibrated. Calvin's text. 3 vehicles spotted 2 blocks from your location. Logan, Miller, Graves, plus 2 unknowns. 5 total. They're armed. Blake, this is your last chance to call for backup. Blake texted back one word. No. He heard them at 11:03 p.m. professional work. They disabled the alarm system remotely, probably using codes Logan had obtained. The back door lock clicked open, nearly silent. Blake remained perfectly still in the shadows. He'd turned off every light in the house, and his eyes had adjusted to the darkness. He had the advantage. 2 figures entered through the back, Miller and Graves, both large men with the heavy tread of enforcers who'd never needed stealth. Behind them came Logan, moving with military precision, and 2 others Blake didn't recognize. They spread out, clearing rooms the way they'd been trained. Blake heard them whispering through comms. Bedroom clear. Kitchen clear. Moving to living room. Logan entered the living room, weapon raised, scanning. He moved right past Blake's position, never seeing the shadow in the corner. Blake struck fast a knife to the back of Logan's knee, dropping him instantly. Before the man could scream, Blake had him in a chokehold, his own weapon taken and pointed at the others. Federal agent, Blake's voice rang out. Drop your weapons. Now. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Miller raised his gun, and Blake shot him in the shoulder, precise, controlled. The man went down screaming. The other 3 surrendered, weapons clattering to the floor. Blake kept Logan in the chokehold as he heard the front door crash open. Calvin and 6 DEA agents flooded in. Weapons drawn, lights blazing. Clear, Calvin shouted. We're federal agents. Get on the ground. In 5 minutes, all 5 intruders were cuffed and being read their rights. Blake released Logan, who glared at him with pure hatred. You're DEA? Logan spat. You piece of... Blake punched him, hard. Logan's head snapped back, blood spraying from his nose. That's for using my wife, Blake said quietly. Calvin pulled him back. Easy, Blake. We got them. Where's Christina? Blake asked. Still, at dinner. We've got agents positioned to arrest her the moment she leaves. Blake nodded, the adrenaline slowly fading. Around him, the DEA was securing evidence, photographing the scene, documenting everything. It was over. Except it wasn't. Friday's drop was still happening, and someone in the cartel had set this in motion. Logan and Miller were just pawns. Blake looked at Calvin. We need to interrogate them now. Someone higher up orchestrated this. Agreed. Let's find out who. At DEA headquarters, Blake watched through one-way glass as Calvin interrogated Dick Logan. The former Marine's nose was swollen from Blake's punch, his hands cuffed to the table. You're looking at 20 years minimum, Calvin said. Conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder of a federal agent, weapons charges. Or you cooperate and maybe we can work something out. Logan stared at the table. I want a lawyer. Lawyers can't save you. We have you on camera entering Blake's house with intent to kill him. We have text messages between you and Christina planning the murder. We have your floor plans. You're done. Calvin leaned forward. But I'm curious, how did you know about the $3 million? Logan was silent. Let me guess, Calvin continued. Someone in the Martinez cartel told you. Someone who wanted Blake eliminated and saw you as a useful tool. Someone who promised you a cut if you did their dirty work. Logan's eye twitched. Bingo. Here's what I think happened, Calvin said. You got fired from the cartel for skimming. You were bitter. You met Blake's wife at some event, saw an opportunity. You seduced her, told her about Blake's criminal work, convinced her you could steal millions and disappear together. But you didn't tell her Blake was DEA, did you? You let her think she was eliminating a criminal. She doesn't know? Logan's voice cracked. She doesn't know he's a Fed. She thinks her husband is a drug trafficker. You lied to her. Logan's expression crumbled. Whatever he'd felt for Christina, love, lust, partnership, it was genuine enough that this revelation hurt him. Who told you about the Friday drop? Calvin pressed. Who wanted Blake dead? Logan hesitated, then spoke quietly. Pedro's lieutenant. Guy named Cesar Bowman. He's been skimming for months, paranoid that Blake would discover it during the audit that's coming next month. He wanted Blake eliminated and saw me as an expendable trigger man. If I succeeded, Blake was gone and Cesar was safe. If I failed, I'd take the fall and Cesar would stay clean. Blake, watching from behind the glass, felt cold satisfaction. Cesar Bowman was Pedro Martinez's second in command. A man Blake had worked with dozens of times. The betrayal went deeper than he'd thought. Calvin came out of the interrogation room. We've got Bowman. With Logan's testimony, we can arrest him tonight. No, Blake said. If we arrest Bowman, Martinez will lawyer up and we'll never get the evidence we need to bring down the entire organization. Let the Friday drop happen as planned. I'll deliver the money to Pedro. And we'll bring down everyone at once. Blake, that's insane. You'll be walking into a meeting with a cartel leader who may or may not know you're compromised. Martinez doesn't know. Only Bowman and Logan knew about the plan to kill me, and they kept it quiet because it was unauthorized. If Martinez knew, he'd have used his own people. This was Bowman acting alone to cover his embezzlement. Blake's mind was racing, putting pieces together. Tomorrow, I deliver the money as planned. You have teams ready to move the moment I give the signal. We arrest Martinez, Bowman, and everyone in the organization in one operation. Calvin nodded slowly. And Christina? She gets arrested tonight when she comes home. Let her see what she helped create. Christina Griffin Fitzpatrick was arrested at 12:17 a.m. Friday morning as she pulled into her driveway. DEA agents surrounded her Mercedes, weapons drawn, and read her rights as she screamed Blake's name. Blake watched from inside the house, his face impassive. When Christina was loaded into a federal vehicle, she saw him standing in the doorway. Their eyes met. Blake, please. I didn't know. He told me you were a criminal. I didn't know you were DEA. Blake said nothing. He just watched as the woman he'd loved, the woman who'd planned his murder, was driven away. Calvin stood beside him. You okay? I'm fine. Blake's voice was flat. Let's finish this. Friday, Blake spent the morning collecting cash from various cartel collection points across the city. $3 million, packed into duffel bags, loaded into his truck. He drove carefully, knowing DEA surveillance teams were tracking his every move, knowing that Cesar Bowman was probably watching too, wondering why Blake was still alive. At 2 p.m., Blake arrived at the warehouse where he was supposed to meet Pedro Martinez. The place was empty except for Pedro and his bodyguards and Cesar Bowman, standing beside Pedro with a forced smile. Blake, right on time. Pedro embraced him. You have the money? $3 million. As agreed, Blake gestured to his truck. Want to count it? No need. I trust you. Pedro turned to Bauman. Cesar, help Blake unload. Blake and Cesar carried the duffel bags into the warehouse, and Blake watched Bowman's face carefully. The man was sweating, nervous. He thought Blake should be dead. Something wrong, Cesar? Blake asked quietly as they set down the bags. No, everything's fine. Just hot today. Blake smiled. You sure? You look like you've seen a ghost. Cesar's hand moved toward his waistband, and Blake knew the man was going to try to kill him right there. Before Cesar could draw his weapon, Blake tackled him, years of combat training taking over. They hit the concrete hard, and Blake had Cesar in a submission hold within seconds. Nobody move. Calvin and 20 agents stormed the warehouse, weapons drawn. Pedro's bodyguards reached for their guns and were immediately subdued. Pedro himself stood frozen, hands raised, his face a mask of shock. Blake held Cesar down as agents cuffed him. Cesar Bowman, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, and about 50 other charges we're going to add. Pedro looked at Blake, understanding dawning. You're a federal agent? 4 years undercover, Blake said, standing up. Pedro Martinez, you're under arrest for drug trafficking, money laundering, and running a criminal enterprise. You have the right to remain silent. As agents led Pedro away, the cartel leader looked back at Blake. I trusted you. That was your first mistake, Blake replied. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of debriefings, testimony preparation, and watching Blake's carefully constructed life fall apart and rebuild itself simultaneously. The DEA seized the $3 million, along with evidence that led to 63 arrests across the Martinez cartel's network. Pedro Martinez faced 400 years in federal prison. Cesar Bowman took a deal 30 years in exchange for testimony against Pedro and full financial disclosure of his embezzlement operation, which totaled over $8 million skimmed over 2 years. Dick Logan received 25 years. Julian Miller and Bernard Graves got 15 each. The two unknown accomplices, revealed to be low-level criminals Logan had hired, got 5 years apiece. Christina's case was more complicated. Her lawyer argued she'd been manipulated, told that Blake was a criminal, convinced she was committing a lesser evil to escape an abusive situation Logan had fabricated. The prosecution wanted 15 years. Blake sat in the prosecutor's office and listened to them debate his wife's fate. What do you want, Blake? The assistant U.S. attorney asked him. You're the victim here. Your opinion matters. Blake thought about it. Christina had planned his murder, yes. But Logan had lied to her, manipulated her, used her love against her. She was guilty, but she was also a pawn. 10 years, Blake said. No early release. Full sentence. She needs to understand the consequences of her choices, but I don't want her life destroyed completely. The prosecutor nodded. 10 years it is. At Christina's sentencing, Blake sat in the gallery. She was led in wearing prison orange, her hair pulled back, her face gaunt. She'd lost weight in jail. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Christina turned and looked directly at Blake. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I was wrong. I was stupid and greedy, and I let someone manipulate me into doing something unforgivable. I deserve everything I'm getting. But Blake, I did love you. That was real. I know you'll never believe me, but it was real. Blake said nothing. The judge sentenced her to 10 years in federal prison. Afterward, in the parking lot, Calvin found Blake sitting in his truck. You okay, man? Yeah. Blake wasn't sure if that was true, but it seemed like the right thing to say. What are you going to do now? Your cover's blown. Can't go undercover again. Blake had been thinking about that. 4 years pretending to be someone else, 12 years total in various undercover roles. He was tired. Tired of lying. Tired of looking over his shoulder. Tired of keeping secrets. I'm done, Blake said. Done with undercover work. Done with the life. Calvin nodded. DEA would love to have you as a field coordinator. Training new agents. Your experience is invaluable. Maybe. I need some time first. Figure out who Blake Fitzpatrick actually is when he's not pretending to be someone else. Take all the time you need. You earned it. 6 months later, Blake stood on a beach in North Carolina, watching the sunrise. He bought a small house near the coast with money from his DEA salary. A place with no neighbors close by and nothing but ocean views. It was quiet, peaceful, nothing like his life had been. He'd spent the months in therapy, working through the betrayal, the violence, the years of living double lives. His therapist said he was doing well, all things considered. Blake wasn't sure what well looked like anymore, but he was sleeping through the night for the first time in years. His phone rang. Calvin. Hey, Blake. Got a proposition for you. DA wants you to head up a new training program for undercover agents. Based here in D.C., but you'd travel to field offices. Good pay, regular hours, no more life or death operations. Blake watched the waves roll in. Regular hours, a normal job, the chance to help other agents avoid the mistakes that had nearly cost him everything. Send me the details, Blake said. I'll think about it. Will do. And Blake, you did good work. Took down a major cartel, saved a lot of lives. Don't forget that. I won't. Blake ended the call and walked down to the water's edge. The sun was fully up now, bright and warm. He thought about Christina, serving her sentence. He thought about Logan and Bowman and all the others who tried to kill him for money. He thought about the life he'd lived, the secrets he'd kept, the man he'd had to become. That man was gone now. The husband was gone. The cartel informant was gone. What was left was just Blake Fitzpatrick, former SEAL, former undercover agent, survivor. A man who'd walked into his own execution and walked out alive. A man who'd lost everything and somehow found himself in the process. He wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in 12 years, he didn't have to pretend to know. Blake turned away from the ocean and walked back to his house. Inside, coffee was brewing, and his laptop sat open on the counter with the DEA training program details Calvin had emailed. He poured a cup, sat down, and started reading. Maybe normal wasn't so bad after all. Maybe survival was enough. Maybe he'd earned this peace. Blake Fitzpatrick smiled a real smile, not the practiced one he'd worn for so many years, and began planning his future. One where nobody tried to kill him, nobody lied to him, and he could finally rest. He'd survived the execution room. Now, he was going to survive the aftermath. And that, he thought, was a kind of victory too.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.